Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, guys, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. We're here to talk a little SEC championship with a couple of former Georgia Bulldogs and two really good former Georgia Bulldogs wearing the red and black. That is none other than former Georgia running back Keith Marshall, repping the Players Lounge, the head honcho over there. How you doing, Keith? It's glad to have you on, man.
I appreciate you having me, man. Always good to see you.
Yeah, and he joins my partner this season. Been jumping on. Keith, we learned that Artie was a barber this season on the show. He had that barber chair working in Athens. So we learned that's also a historian, and that's Arthur Lynch, former number 88 tight end for the Bulldogs.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, JC. Appreciate it, as always, for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for jumping on. You know, this is a little SEC championship special. Georgia, Alabama. Always seems like it comes down to this matchup most of the time. And two of these programs, two of the most dominant in college football. And Atlanta, at least, hasn't gone well for Georgia in the past. The line right now, it opened at Georgia -4, went back to 6 for Georgia, and then back down to 5.5 today. So the total is at 54.5. Nick Saban is 10-1 in SEC championships. Saban has won 16 straight games in Atlanta. Saban's also undefeated in Mercedes-Benz, 7-0. And then Georgia's 0-3 versus Bama and Atlanta. And you two guys played in one of the most heartbreaking games as for the Georgia faithful, and I'm sure you guys as well, in that 2012 game. I think I want to open it with throwing it to you guys on, really preparing for this game and what that meant for you guys and the preparation. Was it different than the regular season? And maybe things that you learned in this game and preparing for this game that you would tell these current Georgia Bulldogs getting ready to play Bama?
Yeah, I'll throw it to you, Keith. You start us off.
I would say for me, it was my freshman year. And so if there's anything that I would tell, to the guys that are gearing up for the big game is to appreciate it, because we never made it back, right? So, I mean, as a freshman, it was cool. In terms of the preparation, we were locked in every week. I don't remember like anything different in terms of the way that the coaches prepped us heading into the game. Obviously, it's later in the season, so you kind of pull back on some of the bloody Tuesdays and things of that nature, and it was more about schematics. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned, not in the game, but just, through the rest of my career, is to really appreciate the moment. It's not very often that you get to go try to play for an SEC championship with, national championship hopes on the line. And so it's not something to take lightly. And I'm sure Kirby and the guys in Athens will make sure the guys are prepped. So, Artie?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, for me, I had the experience of playing in the year before in 2011 against LSU, and we had a lot of the same personnel on that team, and we just kind of were not ready for the moment, right? I think we were tied 10-10.5, and then came in the second half, and I think they scored like 31 unanswered points. Ended up being like 41-10, and that was the prelude to the game of the century. That ended up being like a 9-6 national championship game. Alabama beat LSU. I think Jordan Jefferson was the Alabama quarterback. Jordan Jefferson was the LSU quarterback. McCarron was the Alabama quarterback. The next year, obviously Keith and Todd were the two running backs for us, and really helped us get back there into that SEC championship game. And I think collectively as a unit, we felt much more confident going in. I have like a distinct memory of being in the hotel room, team meeting room, at the hotel the night before, and Coach Rick kind of had a bunch of former players do videos, like selfie videos, if you will, and did a compilation. We're talking like Champ Bailey, Richard Seymour, Ben Jones, AJ Green. I mean, Matt Stafford, you name it, right? Of who's who, and just being like, we're supposed to be here. Don't let Alabama's recent success dictate where you're going in the future. And I thought that was probably the only thing that was different in terms of the preparation. But I think it's impossible to ignore the heightened pressure that comes with the game, and the sense, the heightened importance that comes with the game, because ultimately, particularly for Alabama tomorrow, or Saturday, I should say, they have to win to get in, right? I think Georgia has been the roles are probably reversed here a little bit from in 2012, right? Alabama was the squad. Georgia is now the squad. They almost get these mulligans, if you will. Obviously, Kirby I think he's allergic to the word complacency, so I don't think they will be complacent, but I do think the pressures are a little bit different. There was no 14 playoff back then, but I think everyone expected Alabama to win back then. Now I think everyone expects Georgia to win, which is certainly it's a credit to Kirby and his squad, but it's a different mindset for sure.
Yeah, speaking of Kirby, and I'll throw this to you guys too. I heard David Pollock say this today on a couple of different outlets, but he was talking about the coaching advantage for Georgia, and he said it was a clear and cut advantage for the Bulldogs. Artie, we might have said something about this when we were talking preseason a little bit about how we think the SEC championship would wind up. Do you think that is true for what David's saying there? You see your mind that way?
I'm a conspiracy theorist. David Pollock got fired from ESPN unceremoniously. He kind of called out Nick Saban to his face in the national championship halftime show last year. Saban and ESPN have a great relationship, so I don't know if those two things, if that's a coincidence. There are no coincidences how I've lived my life. So, but so he might be getting back in the good graces of ESPN not getting back in the good graces of ESPN by saying that. But I think ultimately you got to think about it that way, right? I've always been an admirer and have the utmost respect for Nick Saban just because what he's done is pretty insane. I mean, you said it at the top, right? 10-1 in SEC championship games. The only one loss is to one of those Florida teams back in the day. But I mean, what is it? 27 straight games. They're about to three-peat or potentially three-peat. If you don't think that Kirby, we're not talking about the greatest coach of all time. We're talking about the best college football coach today. It's hard to argue against Kirby Smart. I know Nick Saban's done a lot, and Nick Saban will probably, if not for some ridiculous streak that may or may not be broken by like a coach coming up, he'll go down as the best coach of all time. Saban, that is. But right now, it's hard to argue against Kirby Smart. Keith?
I agree with the sentiment that, right here and today, it's hard to argue that the coach that's gone 29 straight, back-to-back national championships in line to get another one is not the most dominant coach or has not established the most dominant program. As a, fan of the game and just respect for the game and like knowing how long Saban has been around and how long, like Kirby came from the Saban tree. Like to hear somebody say he's the best coach, it is kind of like it's a jarring statement. And so I think, when he explained what he meant, I think he saved himself a little bit because, Saban is truly a legend. He's probably the best, as I already said, coach to ever come through college football, at least in, our lifetime. That said, I don't want to diminish what Kirby has done in the fact that like Kirby was a part of a lot of those championships that they won. All those defenses that were so dominant, like Kirby was calling the shots, and he certainly brought that spirit with them over to UGA. So I thought it was a hell of a statement. It is something that is good bulletin board material heading into a big game. So shout out to Pollard for giving Alabama a little bit something extra to fight for. But it's hard to argue against, but it's also like I don't know if I would say that brashly,
Yeah, I was even more thinking too of just the whole staff combined. When you look at that defensive staff for Georgia and Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp, Glenn Schumann's probably going to be up for a head coaching position very soon. I know he interviewed with the Eagles last year, but that might have been some pre-draft information that the Eagles were looking for. But I think as a total, when you look on offense, what Mike Bobo's doing and even Dale McGee at running backs, I think as a total, you could even say this Georgia staff has the upper hand. But then Saban, his dominance is unquestioned. Moving on to when we look at this, I'll throw this to you, Keith. How Georgia's running the football lately and Kendall Milton and getting him back healthy. As a guy who's been in that position and asked to carry the ball a lot of times and be physical and really chew out the clock. In this game like this, Georgia gets up early and needs that time to start ticking fast. How great is it to have Kendall Milton back like that and running angry like he has? I mean, he's had 2 career games in the last 3 weeks. What does that do for your offense? And do you think Georgia sticks with that and really tries to pound in there on an Alabama team that gave up a lot of yards last week to Auburn?
Yeah, well, I would say first and foremost, as a fan of Kendall, his father, the people, not necessarily the football player, I am a fan of him on the field as well. I'm just happy to see the kid healthy and get a chance to shine a little bit towards the end of his career. I think the way that he's played the last 2 weeks has been outstanding. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Edwards. I actually think, and Artie, I'll be curious to get your perspective on this as kind of like a former player. Like Edwards to me is not necessarily like from a physicality or like a freak of nature type athlete. He's not what we're accustomed to in Athens. But in terms of somebody that like when you grade out, I guarantee the kid grades out amazingly because he always makes the first defender miss. He always seems to follow the right cut, so make the right read. And so he's just a very high, functioning athlete, if you will, or high functioning football player in terms of the IQ that goes into the game. I think Kendall, on the other hand, is more of a physical specimen. And when you're going versus a team like Alabama that has those 4- and 5-star guys stacked in the front seven, I think to have somebody that can pound the rock, break some of those tackles, and really punish the defense will serve in our advantage. So I'm happy the kid is back, and not necessarily back, but I'm happy he's finally, healthy and kind of hitting his stride a little bit. It'll be interesting to see. I think it will help us maintain some level of balance, open up some passing lanes for Carson, which is going to be important because I think, everybody agrees that this is going to be the best front seven, particularly the best front four that we've played. And so to be able to keep that balance because of that run game is going to be, it's going to be important. So, it's going to you're going to have a good day on Saturday for sure.
Yeah. Artie, what did you like there when Keith was asking about that combo between Edwards and Milton?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, when I was in school with Keith and Todd, they were both pretty dynamic, right? Like they were like the our era's Thunder and Lightning. Remember when it was Spiller and old boy from Clemson years ago? Forgot the other guy's name, but like Keith could really turn the corner on those kind of like horn plays, which is basically just like sweep left, sweep right. He gets the edge and he's going to go on. And Keith, man, like I mean, Todd, I've never seen a Clydesdale like that. I mean, that dude is just like he just built different. So I don't know if Edwards. I think Keith and Todd kind of had the physical gifts. I think what the way Keith was describing Edwards is kind of how I would describe like a David Andrews or somebody, right? Like a hell of a player. Obviously, David's an offensive center, so it's a little bit different. But just like going to grade out really well, going to do his job at an elite and high level, and you're never going to have to worry about him having an MA or him having a lob, right? Which is like a late off the ball or a loaf, right? Like him not giving his 110% every time. Edwards also is, no offense, David, a far better athlete than he is. So like he obviously makes plays, but when you combine that with Milton, who I think Milton is probably more of that, very physically gifted. When he turns it on, I mean, like I said last night in our live show, JC, like he was playing like someone slapped his mother. You know what I mean? Like he was hitting the hole and like it just looked scary, right? You could tell at the end of the game that the second level defenders were just like, all right, we are not trying to hit this guy, square in the face. We're trying to hit his legs or just get him down in any way possible. So I do think having that kind of that two-back system in place, which UGA has been accustomed to, is coming on in the right time because, as you and I discussed earlier in the year, we didn't really have that, but now I think we do.
And it was the injuries, right, of both Dejan and Kendall. And I think just going off what Keith said as well, is just happy to see him back. You can tell that he's happy to be back healthy as well, just the way he's running. He's always been the leader for Georgia in the running back room in his latter years there, but he hadn't been healthy. And now he can be that back and be that spark too when he comes in healthy too, and a balance with Edwards. And a note on Edwards, I think it's interesting to mention, working with the Players Lounge and listening to these guys talk and writing on it, there are always several times between whether it's Malachi Starks or Javon Bullard or what have you, they always mention watching Edwards on the practice fields and during the game of where his knee looks almost like it's dislocating when he gets low to the ground and his knee's almost touching, but he's still able to get out of it, pop out of it and run. So that's an underrated part of Dejan's game is just getting low and making defenders think he's tackled and getting up and going. So I think the 1-2 punch here is going to be huge on Saturday versus Alabama. Keith, I know you got to get out. Let's before we get to SEC championship predictions here, how you think the game's going to go, and if they cover total hits, what have you. I want to hear about that White House trip, man. What was that like?
I thought you were going a different direction. I do want to discuss this whole playoff madness too, because I'm kind of mind blown how that may
yeah. Well, go ahead with that then. Go ahead with that then.
Well, no, I'll touch on the White House trip. It was really cool, man, for what we're doing with the Players Lounge and really trying to create a platform for student athletes to get to participate, in the media market. You've heard me, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about the pitch, but it was really cool in a full circle moment. Obviously, when I was in school, we didn't have those opportunities. I was involved in SAC and LEAD and some other areas where we were basically lobbying for additional resources. So, to be able to kind of have that conversation at a table with the president was really, really cool. I thought that they were, genuinely interested in hearing us out. The conversation was around more so player rights more broadly than just NIL. They were talking about healthcare, right to a second opinion, long-term health resources. As Artie will tell you, I mean, I sustained injuries in college that I will be dealing with for the rest of my life. Fortunately, I got a chance to go to the league and I have some benefits from that. But for the vast majority of college athletes that don't get that opportunity, after you're done, you're done. And so you're kind of left to handle it however you handle it. And I think the universities have an obligation to be much more supportive long term. And it sounds like the administration is down to support that aim however they can. So it was really a cool opportunity to be among some people with a lot of great perspectives on, how we can continue to drive the industry forward in partnership or on behalf of student athletes, I'll say.
Yeah, I love it. And a lot of people, especially Georgia faithful, were happy to see you up there in that picture as well. And that suit was clean, Keith. That was
I
clean.
appreciate it.
I like it, buddy. What
Yeah, well, if anyone knows Keith, and Keith, obviously we could talk offline down the road at some point and catch up more proper. But it was as someone who played with Keith and has known him since he really was a high schooler because he came in early. Like to see him in a situation representing a lot of people, former players and current players, and in a room, with the president of the United States, right, regardless of your politics. I mean, that's it's an accomplishment, but it's one that I wasn't surprised by, knowing the type of person Keith was back then and is today. So I know we haven't talked in a while, Keith. I haven't seen you in years, but man, I was very proud to be a friend and former teammate, because what an opportunity, right? And you think about where you've come, how proud your family must be. I mean, you think about, what is he, the 48th president? There's only been 48 of those suckers. You know what I mean? Like, not many people get an opportunity to meet a president, never mind sit at a table and discuss an important issue, right? Because I do think student athletes, sure, they can make a little bit of money these days, but there is a lot of damage that can be done to their bodies, mentally and physically. So I think for Keith to be a representative in that situation is not surprising, but it's well deserved.
I appreciate that, my brother.
Yep, I love it. Keith, what were you talking about? CFP crazy. Me and Artie are all caught up on some CFP action, man. We talked about it yesterday. What's standing out to you?
Just the discourse around, obviously, the most deserving four teams versus the best four teams. Obviously, if Georgia loses, what happens? And I don't really see, the word fair gets thrown around a lot, and I don't think there's any scenario where it's going to be fair, just because of all the complexity around it. I mean, the way I see it, if Alabama does win, you can't tell me Georgia's not a top four team. And if you are going to go for a national championship, why would you not have to go through somebody who has won the last 29 games? So I think it would be really crazy to try to sit up here and tell me that a Florida State or a Washington or an Oregon are more deserving or a better football team than UGA. On the flip side, how do you let a Florida State who goes undefeated and does everything they're supposed to do, how do you keep them out? Or how do you keep a Texas that beat Alabama out and put Alabama in? Or, I just think it's going to be absolute madness. So there's going to be some pissed off fan bases. It'll be good for business, though. You know what I mean? Because
Oh,
it's going to be
yeah.
a lot of back and forth.
Hey, controversy sells.
Yeah.
Controversy gets clicks, page views, what have you. And we're with you, Keith, because that's what we were talking about in depth yesterday is, especially Florida State. And I think more people, I've seen a lot more recently on social media and articles today from that rankings release yesterday about that point you just brought up, which was, the most deserving or the best teams. Right. And I think the country knows that Florida State isn't without Jordan Travis, and it's not their fault. They did what they could. It was just football happened,
Mm-hmm.
And we know that Georgia, and I think a lot of people are saying that today as well, that I've seen, is Georgia should be in the top four regardless of what happens on Saturday. So it is going to be interesting. It's going to piss a lot of people off, but I think this weekend is going to tell us a lot, right? You're going to have a lot of people go down. Some upsets might happen. Iowa.
Yeah, look, I got to chime in about this idea of fair, right? Like, life isn't fair, okay? Like, there's a thing, and I'm sympathetic to any student athlete and the amount of work they put in and so on and so forth. But if life was fair, we would have had a rematch with Alabama in 2012. It's not fair. We had to watch Notre Dame get like mauled by Eddie Lacy for 4 quarters, right?
TCU, right?
Yeah. So it's like, if and again, I know it's, but if you're a committee and the committee's job is to place the 4 best teams in this moment in time, you can't, no matter what happens this weekend, like between Alabama and Georgia, like I just can't see, I can't see Florida State being in it no matter what. So,
Yeah.
but who knows? Maybe they'll believe in fairness.
Yeah. I think the nervousness about that and the anxiety from a lot of fans, it goes back to the mistakes they've made in the past with putting in teams and them getting boat raced, which is you can name several teams off the top of your dome right now that's been that way. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Keith, I know you got to get out.
Last thing, and then I'll give you my score prediction. Are you telling me you don't think Georgia boat races a Washington?
Oh, I do. Oh, for sure. I just don't know if the committee will do it. Because we've seen in the past, you put in a Cincinnati versus Bama in 21. You put in TCU, who did beat Michigan, but then look what happened in the national championship. Michigan State back in the day. There's just a lot of times that this happened. So I just don't know if the committee has the balls to do it.
Steve, I think there's JC thinks I'm psychotic for this, but I think there's probably 3 teams in college football, maybe 4, that could beat Georgia, has the capability. I like Michigan. I know you're, if I'm not mistaken, your wife is a Michigan and has some degree.
I'm across the street from the stadium right now. I live right across the street.
Right. So I still think Michigan is a very good football team. Crucify me, go ahead. Oregon, Texas, Alabama. I think everyone else, that's my thing. Go ahead.
I think there's 2. I think that we could play. Ohio State scares me because they have athletes and their style of play doesn't necessarily match up. I think this year we would match up very well with our secondary. But like last year, that was a team that kind of scared me just because I know mano a mano, they have the same caliber of athletes.
Oh yeah, totally.
I think Alabama, Alabama can play with us for sure because they have the same type of guys we have. They've been able to recruit. They have the same type of resources, etc. I think Michigan, on paper, I don't think it's a close game if we bring our best and they bring their players. I think they're kind of a poor man's UGA in how they play football, in my opinion. Texas and Oregon, I don't see it. They're gonna have to show me. You know what I mean? I don't see it.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
got it. Interesting.
I can see what you're saying for Oregon there. Texas, they do have that win over Bama, but play that game again now, what happens? So I don't know if that's a good barometer to go off of a week 2 win, but I'm with you on that already for the most part, except Michigan. No, they haven't played any good offense this year. So how do you know, right? Their defense is great, but do you know? Like, here's a stat for you off of that. We're getting on a rabbit trail, but 10 of the top 14 Big Ten teams in offense are ranked 84th or lower in the FBS in total offense.
Yeah, no, Big Ten is trash. I'm not.
You can't. But that's where Michigan plays, baby. So you got to rank them within that.
Go ahead.
Not only are they trash, but they don't like Michigan played Penn State and Ohio State, and that's it. Like, there's nobody else on their schedule that.
But I guess Ohio State did play Notre Dame, but like my thing is, and we talked about it last week. There's just there's a such thing as momentum in a team who thinks that it's like us versus the world type deal. Like the Patriots kind of had this mantra like during the whole Deflategate and all that stuff, and it's just a real thing. I don't think they're going to win the national championship. I just am not like, if we play them, I'm not going to be like, we're about to curb stomp them, right? JC's like, these dudes are like a JV football team.
I'm not saying that.
And I'm just like, I don't think they're a JV football team, but I think on Georgia's best day, they should beat them. But I'm not I'm not as dismissive of Michigan as you are. I'll
give you that. If it was a close game or if they beat it, I wouldn't be like, when the world happened. But if we beat them by 4 touchdowns, I also wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I get that. But Georgia's best day, they're in my opinion, the best team in the country by a decent margin.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's why Georgia should be in top 4 either way. What happens, but we don't know until Selection Sunday. But on Saturday, big game, Mercedes-Benz, 4 p.m. kick, last SEC game on CBS. Like I said, Georgia is currently a 5.5-point favorite. Totals at 54.5. Keith, how do you see this game going throughout those 4 quarters? And give me a score prediction.
I'm going to say Georgia 34-24. I think it's going to be an intro. I think we pull away late, control the clock, etc. The one thing that scares me is that quarterback. I'm sure Kirby will have a plan to keep him contained, but I do think like he is an exceptional athlete, and that's what can make it. Those are the type of people that can affect the game, regardless of scheme. So,
so if Georgia gets up early, is that what I'm seeing right for you? If Georgia gets up early, is able to control the clock and just force Milroe to pass.
Exactly. I think our offense is better than their offense. I think our offense is going to score. They're going to move the ball. They're going to be able to control the clock if that's what they need to do. I think their offense will have some explosive plays. Will score the ball, will move it, but I don't think. I think our defense will get them off the field and give us enough of a buffer to come away at the end.
I love it. All right, so 34-24, Georgia covers. The under hits there. No, that's over. 58. Yeah, that's over. Artie, what's up, bud?
I like that score prediction. I'll say this: if Georgia doesn't cover, if it's a close game, I don't like Georgia. Like if it gets to be like a 2-point something like game like that in Atlanta, there's just bad juju in that place, and I don't like if like that first national championship game when we had the pick. I think we had to win by like 10 or something, and we beat the spread. That makes sense to me. But if they're within the spread, if it's like a 3-point game going in the fourth quarter, I don't feel good about it at all. I think Jalen Milroe is what Anthony Richardson was supposed to be. I think he is like a freak athlete. I think he's smart as shit, to be honest with you. And I just think that he's got a competitive edge to him. And we don't play particularly well against running quarterbacks. We just haven't. But with that said, I think Carson Beck, who's been like this kind of silent, just doing his job day in, day out, not getting any love. I think he's going to have the best game of the season for him. And I think he's going to be the difference maker. So I think it's going to be like a 34-21 game. We probably like up by 7, 28 or 28-21 in the fourth, and we pull away with like another touchdown at the end. So I think like 30, what would that be? 35-21, something like that. Yeah. That's kind of how I see it. But if it's close going to the fourth, I'm not watching the game.
We've been burned too many times. I'm with you. I partially don't even want to go to the game because I'm like, we've never won when I've been there. So
I'm not. I've already turned down my invite. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm sitting on my couch watching this thing.
Wow, guys, y'all got to throw me that invite then if y'all ain't gonna use it. Georgia covers over hits for Artie as well. I'm with you guys. I got 38-27, so that's a cover and that's over hit too. Like for the reason Keith said too, our offense is just better too. And in the game, who do you trust more to go down and score points, control the clock, control really the momentum of the game? And it's Carson Beck and that Georgia offense who can spread it out a lot better than that Alabama offense. They've been relying really heavily on Milroe as a runner, as they should, and he's played really well. And that's where that offense has taken off this year. They weren't doing that, especially versus Texas, right? They play that game again and do that. What happens?
They win by double digits.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, especially when they were losing Quinn Ewers, and he just got back. He looked good against Texas Tech, but it is Texas Tech. So I like Georgia as well. There is bad juju, as per states the numbers that I threw you guys out.
Bad juju, man. Yeah. It's bad juju.
But Keith, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. Make sure to check out playerslounge.io. That's your favorite Georgia athletes on there each week. We've got a few shows out this week that they talked about Bama in. Another one coming out tomorrow as well. So make sure to join us there. Keith, I know you got to jump off, so we'll let you get out, and Artie and I will keep going a little bit more.
Appreciate you. Good to see you.
Love you, man. Good to see you, man. Take care.
Since we had Keith on, he had a hard stop there. We're going to go a little backwards today. I'm going to tell you why I think Georgia does what it does. First thing I want to note is the familiarity with these two teams. Not only even players-wise, I mean, you have Jermaine Burton, former Georgia receiver. He is really their main deep threat, right? How many times this year have we seen him take off for a 50, 60-yard touchdown pass, right? And Jalen Milroe is so good deep. You got Tresman Marshall there at linebacker. He's done well this season for them. Familiarity there. Also coaching staff-wise, right? And a lot of these players were basically recruited by both programs. You have Joe Cox there on the Alabama staff.
Zach Mettenberger.
Zach Bentenberger, Georgia legends for one reason or the other. And then obviously Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann on that Georgia staff. Will Muschamp's a guy who played Alabama throughout his 30 years of coaching as well. So I think that's something to note. These guys, I think that's why this game is more often not really close, and then maybe the team that's an underdog or not playing as well, the numbers don't tell you they're going to play that well. They end up playing really well, make it close and what have you. So I think that's something to consider when we talk about this game and how difficult it has been for Georgia to beat Alabama in Atlanta, which has never happened. So Georgia, by the numbers here, ranks 8th in scoring offense. Alabama ranks 17th. So that's the offensive advantage we're talking about. 6th best scoring defense for Georgia. Alabama's at 14. Not a big jump. It's only a 2-point jump. Georgia ranks 2nd for third down conversion rate. Alabama is at 48.72%. Yeah, that's 12th. Defensively, Georgia's 2nd there in that category in third down conversion rate. Defended, Alabama ranks 26th. So it's just really a third down advantage also. But red zone percentage wise, Alabama has a slight advantage there. Georgia scores with the best in the country. They have the most attempts in the country in the red zone, but touchdowns in the red zone. That's where they lack. That's where they've lacked this year is drive stalling. And then as far as sacks go, Georgia is not a sack team we talk about all the time. So I'm not going to even say how many sacks. There's 66 in the country. Georgia is, but it's more about pressure and using all 4 guys to do that. Alabama is getting after the quarterback. 10th in the country, 3 per game. Georgia has only allowed 10 this year. So something to watch out for as far as pressure goes. And we were talking about explosive plays there, and it seems like Alabama has that run game, the running quarterback, obviously, and then they rely on Milroe getting out of that pocket and chucking it downfield. Georgia, as far as their offense goes, 9th, 6th, and 7th as far as 20, 30, and 40-yard plus plays in the country. Bama's surprisingly a lot worse than I thought they were because you watch the games, you think they get these deep shots all the time. They're 50th, 83rd, and 45th in that category.
I'd be interested. I'd be interested to see where they are in those categories if you're just ranking them from like week 6 or 7 on, because they were abysmal those first 5 weeks, 6 weeks. But I think
that's a good point.
I think to your point, where they've been and halfway through October and November has been probably much higher. But sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. That's perfect. That's a good point. Let's talk Carson Beck versus Jalen Milroe here. Carson Beck gets the ball out quickest in the country, 2.3 seconds. Jalen Milroe, 3.48, the slowest. So that's interesting. You have the best and the worst in one category. You don't see that often. And that's a pretty big category.
That's kind of interesting you say that. Like, and I don't know if it's like a Bama thing or what, but like apparently Bryce Young coming into the league, like his college, he held on to the ball the longest post snap, and then Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud got rid of it the quickest. And they talk about translating skills to the NFL and this and that. So that's interesting that Milroe is holds on to it a lot. I mean, obviously he scrambled around this and that, but that's a very interesting stat.
I think
it's weird that Bryce Young also had a very whatever. Yeah,
that's two different offensive coordinators too. That's something
100%.
Or if that's we'll see that too when Milroe moves on, if that's a consistent thing. But I think what plays into it, you did say scrambling. I think that's one big part of it. Another one, what I'd say is because how bad, I say bad because he is bad at intermediate passing, right? So if you're bad at intermediate, right, and you take longer to throw, those intermediate routes are going to be covered quicker, right? Am I right on that? The defense, easier to cover there. But then the deep throws, that's where he excels. So he's able to hold on to the ball a little bit, let his guy get open. Maybe that plays into it. And just to give you a numbers example on that, Milroe's grade on throws 20-plus yards, 97.9, a second in the FBS. So we're not kidding when we say he's good throwing the ball downfield, right?
He's great.
His deep ball is beautiful, and he's very powerful arm. Beck in that category, 90.7, so not far off. All right, here's the big difference. Milroe has a 58.8 grade. That's almost 40 points behind his deep throw grade on intermediate throws. And that's where Beck is 92.9. I mean, he's consistent in both areas. He's that That NFL passer, man. He can dice you low and he can throw it over the top of you. Something to consider. I mean, that's and why I say these things to give you an idea for your listeners and viewers of why I'm thinking Georgia does what it does is there's two things to me, Artie, and tell me if I'm wrong here, what you think of it. Georgia, obviously the first key, and I know Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann, especially inside linebackers and that front seven, Trey Scott, they're talking about how are they going to contain Milroe. And we heard Kirby Smart asked about it this week. He said, the reporter brought up spying the QB. And he was like, well, a lot of people have been trying to spy him. Auburn tried to spy him from the 31-yard line on 4th and goal, which makes no sense, by the way, folks. I mean, how is he going to run 31 yards when you have 8 people? Actually, it was 9. It was like 9 people they dropped in coverage. I mean, somebody's going to catch him in 31 yards. He's not that fast, okay? So why I think Georgia, if they're able to keep him in the pocket for a little bit longer, force him into some bad throws, keep everything in front of you, don't let the deep ball hit, and force him to do what he's bad at, intermediate passing. He's going to make some plays on that, right? I mean, he's gonna convert, right? They're going to get some good plays out of that, and it might even hit one deep. But I think you can limit that, right, and force them into those intermediate passing, then you get them off the field, and you let that Georgia offense go to work, and nobody's stopping this year. That's my thoughts on it. Am I wrong there, Artie?
Well, no, I think Carson, for me, his development over the past year is a testament to him and the work he's put in, but really also Mike Bobo. Mike Bobo is such an underrated coach of the quarterbacks in developing, right? So when you compare Beck and Milroe's got all the talent in the world. But I do think, and I like Tommy Rees. I met him years ago, or I know him from years ago because I trained with some of his buddies from Notre Dame. But I do think it's his first time being the OC in the SEC. I think he's also the quarterback's coach, and I just think you could tell that although they have been playing to Milroe's strengths, like Milroe has still a ways to go in his development as a passer. Whereas if you look at Beck, his development as a passer has incrementally gotten better week in and week out, week in and week out. And Milroe, I think they're just decided like overnight, halfway through the season, like let's just play to his strengths, right? Deep ball thrower, let him use his legs. And so I don't know, I just think that, Milroe is such an exceptional athlete. It's hard to be like, not be in awe of him. But like I said earlier when Keith was on, I think this is going to be Carson Beck's best game. Now, I have no idea. It might be Milroe's best game, right? We might have like a 48-45 showdown between quarterbacks. But I really do think, those stats that you were breaking down with Beck, I think that is going to pay dividends here this week on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And that's what I'm looking forward to watching, especially. I think we'll know that early as well and see how comfortable Carson versus Milroe is and what each coordinator does to get these guys going in an incredible environment. It's going to be incredible. I mean, this is a national championship, basically.
Man, there is no environment like the SEC championship. Never played in the national championship. Played a lot of bowl games, but never the national championship. The SEC championship game is like Georgia, Florida on steroids, right? Like split down the middle in the dome, Atlanta, which is basically the capital of the SEC, capital of the South, Atlanta, Georgia. And it's like, I mean, the fans they've been boozing all day. They're boozing in that stadium and they are just getting after it. And it is loud as hell. I mean, there are a few places. It's probably the loudest environment I had ever played in. No, wow. Full stop. Yeah.
Wow. People don't even talk about that. They want to talk about the home stadiums, right? They don't even talk about the SEC champ.
It's different, dude.
And momentum plays a huge part in that, right? Just like Georgia, Florida, right? Like you said it when we were playing them in Jacksonville this year. What team is doing better? What team just gets a turnover? What happens?
Yeah, it's just like this. Boom, 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 back and forth, back and forth. And in this particular matchup, it's like, if Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali could fight, right? It's like Ali, Frazier, was it Hagler? Was it Hagler versus Tyson? Like, it's just two heavyweight dudes slugging at each other, and that's personally, as a fan, that's what we should all want, right? So I'm with you. I think two of the best teams in college football, if not the two best right now, are playing on Saturday. So no matter the outcome, we're getting spoiled as college football fans. I just hope that we're extra spoiled by being college football and Georgia fans with a win.
100%. 100%. Everybody get your heart rate medicine out. This is going to be one of those games. Players to watch here. And it's something that interesting when you talk about how Carson's going to play, how the offense is going to play. Got some dudes on defense. Surprise, guys. Alabama has dudes on defense. Safety, Caleb Downs. Georgia fans very familiar with this dude. Leads the team with 95 tackles. Former 5-star major Georgia target. Also a Georgia native. And then defensive back Terrion Arnold's been one of the best in the SEC this year. Leads the team with 5 picks. And then edge Dallas Turner. Everybody knows about him. 8 sacks, tied for 3rd in the SEC. Just the body type of an NFL pro already. Him and Amarius Mims. I'm interested to see if they move him around a bit. I believe he has been on that left side of Dallas most of the year. I could see they might move him around a bit. You never know. I think that might be an advantage for Alabama if they do, to get him in different spots. But him and Amarius Mims, I think that's the matchup to watch. And Amarius Mims, since he got back from injury, has been really good. And he's going to be first-round NFL draft. So how does that matchup go? They're playing for a draft spot, I believe, between these two guys, because these NFL scouts are going to see how good both of these dudes are at. So it's like playing an NFL pro right there in this SEC championship. And then one more wide receiver, Isaiah Bond, also a Georgia native, and leads the team in receptions. We know about Jermaine Burton. He has that per average reception and that deep threat, former Georgia Bulldog. But Isaiah Bond is that guy. He leads them in receptions. He's the go-to as well. So something to consider. And then last thing already has to go in here just a minute. Players on the injury report. Quick one. Bama leading running back Jace McClellan. He was seen on crutches after the Iron Bowl. He's got a foot injury. He's day-to-day. Something to watch out for. He does lead them. Georgia's expected to get back McConkey, Bowers, Ratledge, and Robert Thomas after each missing last week. And they also have a chance to get back Jamon Dumas-Johnson. So I think he's critical in a game like this to keep the players. And he's such a leader, and he's such a vocal leader. He doesn't get down as well. I'm not saying Georgia doesn't have that, but it's always good to have one of those guys. I'm sure Artie would agree with that. And he's also a very physical presence, and I think we were missing that a little bit last week versus Georgia Tech with those QB runs as well. So when you have a guy like Milroe back there, having your starting middle linebacker who knows the defense better than everyone is great to have. So watch out for him. Artie, you already gave your prediction. I did as well. We appreciate you guys for listening and watching. As always, you can find us at Lynch1788 on Twitter. Artie's got something.
Quick thing, no history lesson today, but I'm going to reiterate a history lesson a couple weeks ago. This is the very last of all time, at least for the foreseeable future, SEC on CBS ever. And what a way to end it with a de facto playoff game between the two most dominant programs of definitely the past 5 to 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. Alabama, Georgia, SEC on CBS. That little tune, I'm going to be nostalgic, but, it's been a very, very fun season with JC. Obviously not our last show, but I'm excited. Everything is coming full circle here with Alabama, Georgia back. Let's burst the Atlanta bubble, that freaking curse, man. And let's win the last game ever on SEC CBS. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I'm sitting down in front of the TV early in this one. I got to hear that. I got to. Make sure to tune into that. I'm also JC Shelton _ on Twitter. Find us at UGA Football Live, as well as UGA Wire. Also, words for the Players Lounge.io. Make sure to check them out. Appreciate it, Artie. Go Dogs, baby.
Go Dogs.